It seems the narrative among terminally online greasy weirdos is that Elden Ring is the best game of the decade. Never mind that it came out in 2022. Never mind that plenty of better Nintendo games have come out since. Never mind the fact that Tears of the Kingdom completely eclipsed it in relevancy. Never mind the fact that Elden Ring is just a stale, generic, derivative version of Dark Souls. It's the greatest game of the decade because it's a fad to say that now. It is downright laughable just how the gaming community is trying to rally to push this meme that FromSlop is the greatest developer in the world, that they put out the game of the decade. All the while, Nintendo not only stomps them out, they're partnering with them and producing their own Elden Ring, which nobody is talking about or is excited for. It is very, very interesting seeing this narrative being set up, being established, and being dismissed by any actual player. Because I can tell you that there have been dozens of games over the past several years that are not only better than Elden Ring, but are also more difficult and take far more skill to play. Like Elden Ring is just stale, derivative, like boring nonsense and really should be considered as such. With all that being said though, what next? When exactly is this going to end? When are the From Sloppers going to kneel and acknowledge that Elden Ring is not game of the decade and that it's just kind of a lazy knockoff product? It's probably never going to happen, honestly. Like FromStop fans are so stuck in their bubble that they genuinely think that this game was a major hit and that this game was genuinely this huge influential thing instead of just something that took off because people had nothing else to play that year. This is a really interesting case study on how a mediocre IP like Souls can blow up out of nothing but sheer like cultural impact and hype. Not because it's good, but because everyone else is bad. It is a very transparent example of just how something like Demon Souls can come out, like leave no impact whatsoever, be hated for being stale, derivative nonsense. Even back then, it looked terrible, and then just failed to grow it, failed to evolve it, failed to do anything with it. Like they succeeded only because every other game on PlayStation 360 just became overly cutscene focused and didn't actually evoke the same style of NES style gameplay that Nintendo consoles had. And so Elden Ring was an attempt at capturing what Metroid, Zelda, Castlevania managed back in the 80s, and it completely failed at it, like almost humorlessly so. It was bizarre seeing so many people like sit back and say that like this is the greatest game ever as they like scroll through their phones looking at guides while I was playing games like Pokemon Legends Arceus and all these other great Nintendo games released in 2022, like all of which were way, way, way better than Elden Ring. Like to the point where you can't even really name them all, honestly. Like saying that Elden Ring isn't the best game of the decade is kind of a misnomer because in reality, it wasn't even the best game that year. Probably wasn't even the best game released that week or month. Like, this isn't a game that's good. It isn't a game that stands up on its own merits. And the only reason you hear about it still is because to this day there has never been anything that's kind of hit that same like had that same impact. Baldur's Gate 3 and Expedition 33 are trying to recapture it, but the reality is those games don't were never as like well known as From Slop, and they never will be. Like the industry just keeps trying to sell people on these like obvious industry plants. Oh, that is one nice thing I'll say about Elden Ring is that it's not really an industry plant. If anything, it's kind of the opposite, where it's just something that like the third parties came up with that became genuinely popular among a casual demographic. Um, like it's not a plant like Baldur's Gate 3 or Expedition 33, but Elden Ring is like a stale, derivative, uninspired knockoff of just countless other better Nintendo games. It's Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild. The list goes on and on and on, and it's not as good as those games. You know, if Breath of the Wild came out in 2020, like that would be the game of the decade. And honestly, that's kind of the way I look at it. Like why are we like beginning and ending the game of the decade in 2020? Because I feel almost like Breath of the Wild is the game that defined this decade, even though it came out in 2017. Like, where's our cutoff date? Like, there has never been anything that's left as much of an impact on gaming as Breath of the Wild this decade. You know, like this is the game that Elden Ring was trying to knock off, trying to trying to be to live up to the standards of, and it just failed. It's not even close. It's embarrassing how badly Elden Ring failed to live up to the expectations set by Nintendo and The Legend of Zelda. And you just see a bunch of people who can't even acknowledge it, who can't even acknowledge that Tears of the Kingdom was better than this. Like, when Elden Ring 2 comes along, which I'm sure it will, like, it's just going to be the same thing again. There's going to be no innovation. There's going to be no change. It's going to be like Dark Souls 2 all over again, where people are like spurging out about everything they did in that game. And it's just, you really think that Elden Ring is the best game released this decade. To me, I just find the entire concept laughable. If you think that, play more games. That's kind of my mentality on it. That's always been my mentality on it. Like, Dark Souls is and always has been a complete joke. I'm tired of hearing about it. I can't wait until Duskbloods comes out so Nintendo fans can like publicly say just how much these games actually suck. It's gonna be great. Getting a Nintendo exclusive from Slap game and being able to denounce it as just the slap that it is. It's gonna be phenomenal. Elden Ring is, I think, a clear demonstration of just how all hype and no substance is never really gonna carry you into relevancy. Like, Elden Ring sold a lot, but how many of its people who bought it have finished the entire game, especially without a guide? How many of them have actually like engaged with From Slap as a company? How many of them are like interested in anything outside of the Souls formula? Like, FromSoft at this stage is a one-trick pony. They have failed to branch out outside of their stale derivative Souls formula, and they are struggling to keep themselves relevant. And eventually, people are going to fall off and lose interest in this derivative, uninspired video game company. All the while, Tears of the Kingdom comes out and it stomps all over Elden Ring.